Roll Tide, everyone, and welcome to Tide TV This Week, brought to you by Thompson Tractor. I'm Roger Hoover. I'm joined by Kira Goldstein. And Kira, it's great to be back in Tuscaloosa after last week I was at the SEC Women's Basketball Tournament.
Yeah, it's so good to have you back. And the men's Alabama basketball team closed out the regular season this past Saturday on the road against the Georgia Bulldogs. Alabama jumped out to the early 5-0 lead on 5 points from John Petty Jr., but the Bulldogs then went on a 29-10 run, jumping out to a 29-15 lead. Alabama was able to close it to single digits before the half as Georgia led at the break 36-30.
The Crimson Tide finished the first half on a 15-7 run over the final 8 minutes and matched that with a 15-2 run to begin the second half. In all, the 30-9 combined run turned a 29-15 Bulldogs lead into a 45-38 advantage for the Crimson Tide. However, the Bulldogs would not go away. With Bama up 5, Georgia's P.J. Horn hit the shot from beyond the arc to make it a 2-point game at 59-57. The Tide then used another run, this one a 12-2 run, to stretch their lead back out to double digits at 71-61 with just over 8 minutes remaining. The Bulldogs just kept fighting back and managed to once again chip away at the Tide's lead until it was once again another one-possession game, 82-79 with a minute 13 to go. Needing a big shot, Keon Ellis for the Crimson Tide would step up and bury the tray to give the Crimson Tide some breathing room at 85-79 with only 45 seconds to go. The three-pointer from Ellis started a 7-0 run to finish the game for the Crimson Tide as the SEC regular season champions ended the regular season with a win over the Bulldogs on the road in Athens, 89-79.
After a slow first half, the Crimson Tide scored 59 points in the second half, shooting 63% from the floor and 80% from beyond the arc. Javon Quinterly was the catalyst for that big second half performance as he led the Crimson Tide with 18 points, all coming in that second half. Quinterly also added 5 rebounds and 4 assists, and John Petty Jr. added 15 and a team-leading 7 rebounds.
With the victory, Alabama finishes the regular season at 21-6 overall and 16-2 in SEC play.
Very impressive. The Crimson Tide earned the #1 overall seed for the tournament that is being held at Bridgestone Arena in Nashville this week. We'll have a complete recap of the Tide's SEC tournament performance next week.
Senior Herb Jones was named the SEC Player of the Year as well as the SEC Defensive Player of the Year. Jones becomes just the 5th player in Crimson Tide history to be named Player of the Year, joining Wendell Hudson, Reggie King, Derek McKee, and Erwin Dudley. Jones is also the first ever Alabama player to be named the Defensive Player of the Year. Along with that, he was also named First Team All-SEC, and if that wasn't enough, he was also named a Third Team All-American by Sports Illustrated. Jones becomes the 20th All-American in Alabama basketball history.
Congratulations, Herb Jones. Along with Jones, senior John Petty Jr. was named to the First Team All-SEC by the coaches and media, a Second Team All-SEC selection by the Associated Press, and Third Team All-SEC honorable mention by USA Today. Jaden Shackelford was named to the All-SEC Second Team by the league's coaches and media, and Josh Primo was honored as an All-Freshman SEC selection.
And in just his second season as the head coach of the Crimson Tide, head coach Nate Oates was selected as the Southeastern Conference Coach of the Year. Jones and Oates become the first Alabama duo to sweep the Player of the Year and Coach of the Year awards since Mark Gottfried and Erwin Dudley achieved that feat back in 2002. In this week's Associated Press Top 25, Alabama moves up 2 spots from 8 to 6, returning to the spot they held just 2 weeks ago. The ranking of 6th is tied for Alabama's highest in the AP Top 25 this season. Arkansas joins the Tide in the Top 25 as the Razorbacks are 2 spots behind at number 8.
Over in the coaches' top 25, the Tide remains at number 5. This week, they are in sole possession of 5th place. Alabama was tied with West Virginia at 5th in last week's coaches' top 25. And this week, Arkansas moves up 5 spots from 13 to number 8.
The Alabama women's basketball team could improve their NCAA tournament seeding with a win in the SEC tournament. We'll tell you how they did, coming up next.
Tide TV This Week, presented by Thompson Tractor, the exclusive provider of Caterpillar heavy equipment and genuine cat parts for Alabama and Northwest Florida. Visit ThompsonTractor.com for more information. The University of Alabama, where legends are made. Ford, for great offers on F-150, see your local Ford dealer. Proud sponsor of the Crimson Tide.
Welcome back to TideTV This Week, brought to you by Thompson Tractor. The Alabama men's basketball team is competing at the SEC tournament this week, and last week, the Alabama women's basketball team took part in the SEC women's tournament in Greenville, South Carolina.
Alabama entered the SEC tournament as the 7th seed, with the Tide taking on 10th seed Missouri. Alabama defeated Mizzou 74-59 to open SEC play earlier this season.
Alabama got off to a hot start, knocking down their first 8 shots from the field. The Tide led by as many as 13 in the opening period and led by 10, 28-18 after the first 10 minutes of play. Alabama pushed the lead back out to 13 in the second, but Missouri battled back, cutting the Tide's lead to single digits as Alabama led by just 6 at the half, 40-34.
A 6-minute scoring drought from the floor allowed for the Tide to take the Tigers their first lead of the game at 51-50 with 2:52 to go in the third period. And as the final 10 minutes of action began, the score was tied at 57. Alabama scored the first bucket in the fourth period and never trailed again. The Tide secured the win with an 11-3 run to end the game as Alabama defeated Missouri 82-74 for the second-round victory over the Tigers.
Alabama had 5 players score in double figures for the first time this season. Araya Copeland led the Tide with her 10th double-double of the season, as Copeland finished with 22 points and a team-high 10 rebounds. Megan Abrams added a season-high 19 points with 5 assists, and that win earned Christy Curry's squad a matchup with the number 2 seeds, South Carolina Gamecocks.
6 turnovers by Alabama allowed South Carolina to jump out to a 12-0 lead. The Crimson Tide didn't get their first basket until almost 5 minutes into the game. South Carolina shot 10 of 14 from the floor, including 3 of 4 from beyond the arc, as the Gamecocks built a 20-point lead to finish the first period 26-6. South Carolina extended their lead to 27 in the second, before Alabama closed out the first half with a 14-3 run to make it a 42-26 score at the half.
Despite getting outscored 26-6 in that first period, the Tide outscored the second-seed Gamecocks in all 3 periods after that. Alabama outscored South Carolina 20-16 in the second and 37-33 over the second half. But that first period deficit was just too much to overcome against the team that would go on to win the SEC tournament. It was a tremendous effort over the final 30 minutes of play, but the Gamecocks defeated the Tide in the quarterfinals 75-63. And now it's on to the NCAA tournament for the women. Coach Curry and the Tide will learn their seeding and their opponent on Monday. The Women's College Basketball Tournament Selection Show will air on ESPN on Monday at 6 p.m. Central.
Earlier this week, I had the opportunity to chat with Coach Curry on the Tide season, their NCAA tournament hopes, and more. Joined now by Coach Curry. And Coach, you got to be excited. It's March Madness, and the Crimson Tide are in the mix for an NCAA tournament berth. How's everything going?
It's going great. Excited to know what we have to look forward to. A lot of people have put a lot of time and energy into waiting on this moment, and I'm just excited for our players, to experience that.
You had your first taste of tournament basketball in Greenville, South Carolina for the SEC tournament, had the win against Missouri, finished strong against South Carolina. What were your big takeaways from those 2 games?
Really loved how our team, came out against Missouri and sustained long periods of, they'd make a run and we would answer right back. Against South Carolina, they came out and made a run. We weren't able to answer quick enough, but as the game went along, we outscored them by 8 in the second, third, and fourth. Finished the game really strong. I think it just shows you that you've got to put 40 minutes together in this league to be successful. We understand that. We were able to do that against Missouri and faltered a little bit against South Carolina, but obviously South Carolina went on to do that a couple of nights after us, to everybody that they played. But it's a lot, to take away, that knowing that when you compete in this league, you can be ready to compete against anybody in the country. So I know we take a lot of confidence from our experiences into the NCAA tournament.
Of course, you've had success in the NCAA tournament before in your career, taking a team all the way to the national championship game. Just what are the keys to coaching in a tournament like this?
Well, it's one and done, and it's 40 minutes of best basketball. And, we know that this week we're preparing for that. We're putting them in situations against our practice squad. And how do we get better this week? I think those teams that continue to grow and aren't just satisfied with getting there, that continue to know that you can really create. It only takes 40 minutes to create a lot of special memories this time of year. And we're prepared because of the league that we play in. We won't see any better teams throughout the rest of the season than we've seen already in South Carolina and A&M and Georgia and Ole Miss. So the experiences we've had, we're going to draw from those and realize that we have an opportunity for a brand new season and to do something really special.
Coach, thank you for joining us. Best of luck coming up, first of all, on Selection Monday when we hear Alabama's name called, and then all the preparations for the first couple rounds of the NCAA tournament. Best of luck. Thank you, and roll Tide.
Thanks for having us, Roger. Have a good week and roll Tide.
That's Christy Curry. This is Roger Hoover, and thank you for watching Tide TV this week. We'll have more coming up in just a moment.
Tide TV This Week, presented by Thompson Tractor, the exclusive provider of Caterpillar heavy equipment and genuine cat parts for Alabama and Northwest Florida. Visit ThompsonTractor.com for more information. Ford, for great offers on F-150, see your local Ford dealer. Proud sponsor of the Crimson Tide. The University of Alabama, where legends are made.
Welcome back to Tide TV This Week, brought to you by Thompson Tractor. The Alabama gymnastics team wrapped up their regular season competition this past Friday night as the 6th-ranked Crimson Tide hosted #1 Florida.
Yeah, and a win over Florida would give Alabama a share of the regular season championship with top-ranked Florida. It was senior night for the Crimson Tide as Lexi Graber and Alonza Klopfer were honored. In addition to senior night, Alabama celebrated the 30th anniversary of the 1991 NCAA championship team.
Alabama opened the meet with a 49-3 on vault led by Luisa Blanco's 9.925, which matched her career best in the event. The Tide came back with a 49.325 on the uneven bars, paced by Blanco once again, as she posted a score of 9.95, which also tied her career best mark. On the balance beam, the Crimson Tide were led once again by Blanco as she scored a 9.925, while Lexi Graber had a 9.975 as she tied her career best to give Alabama a 49.275 on the floor exercise.
Luisa Blanco won the all-around as she finished with a 39.7, her 4th consecutive meet of 39.5 or higher. Blanco and Lexi Graber won all 4 events, with Blanco taking the first in 3 and Lexi winning the other. In winning 3 events and the all-around, Blanco was named the SEC Gymnast of the Week for the 2nd time in 3 weeks. Despite the fantastic performances by those two, the Tide just missed a share of the SEC regular season championship as the #1 ranked Gators held on for the 197.425 to 197.225 win.
Dana Duckworth's squad now turns their attention to the postseason. The Tide will begin competition at the SEC Championships in Huntsville beginning on March 20th.
Best of luck to them. This past weekend, the Alabama baseball team hit the road for their first road series of the season as the 23rd ranked Tide traveled to South Carolina for the 3-game series with the College of Charleston.
Alabama shut out the Cougars in Game 1 of the opening series 8-0, but the Tide was shut out in Game 2, 1-0. Alabama would need a win in Game 3 on Sunday to take the series.
After getting shut out on Saturday, the Crimson Tide bats showed up in a big way in Game 3 on Sunday. The Alabama offense erupted for a season-high 21 runs. Owen Diodati and Sam Prater tied for the team lead with 4 RBI apiece, while Will Patota and Andrew Pinckney were close behind with 3 each. Diodati's 4 came on his grand slam, which is his 2nd of the season, while Prater delivered an RBI single and a bases-clearing double for his 4. 13 of the 14 Tide batters got a hit. Antoine Jean picked up his first win of the season as he tossed 5 scoreless innings and allowed just 3 hits and struck out 4 as Alabama defeated the College of Charleston 21-3 for the series win.
It's a good football score, 21-3. Alabama returned to the Joe on Tuesday night as the Tide hosted South Alabama. With Alabama trailing 5-1 in the 7th, the Tide pushed 5 runs across the plate to take the lead. However, South Alabama took the lead back with 3 runs in the top of the 8th to take an 8-6 advantage. It looked as though the Jaguars may take the game, but after a couple of singles and a few errors, Bama trailed by just 1 with 1 out, bases loaded. Owen Diodati stepped to the plate, and he delivered as he crushed the Jaguar pitch deep into the student section in right field for the walk-off grand slam. What a hit, what a comeback for the Crimson Tide. Diodati's grand slam gave Alabama the 11-8 win over South Alabama.
Wow, 2 in a row. It's crazy. Alabama returned to the Diamond on Wednesday night as the Tide hosted Jacksonville State. The Tide defeated the Gamecocks 7-2 to improve to 12-2 on the year.
It was a busy weekend here in T-Town as the Alabama softball team was in action as well. The Tide hosted Kent State, Northern Iowa, and South Alabama for the Easton T-Town Showdown. Alabama posted a couple of run rule victories over Kent State on Friday to kick off the weekend. The Tide defeated the Golden Flashes 9-1 in 6 innings in Game 1 of the doubleheader. Lexi Kilfoyle picked up the win to improve to 7-0 on the year as she allowed just 2 hits and no earned runs, striking out 7. Alabama had 16 hits and 11 runs in Game 2 as the Tide run ruled the Golden Flashes 11-3 in 6. Crystal Goodman picked up the win and Jayla Torrance came on to close the game, pitching 2 scoreless innings while striking out 3.
On Saturday, Coach Murphy and the Tide faced his alma mater, Northern Iowa, for 2 games. Bailey led off the bottom of the 4th with a solo shot to get Alabama on the scoreboard first. Northern Iowa made it a game, though, as Alabama had to battle to come away with the 5-3 win in Game 1. Game 2 would be a very different story. Up 3-0 going into the 5th, Kaylee Tao singled through the right side to score Sarah Cornell. You know, Roger, we love grand slams here at Alabama. We've already had several this year, and another walk-off grand slam this week with baseball. How about one with softball? With the bases loaded and 2 out, Savannah Woodard stepped to the plate and knocked the pitch over the right field wall for the grand slam. Woodard's home run made it an 8-0 run rule win for the Crimson Tide.
Pretty impressive grand slam. Alabama did come up short on Sunday against South Alabama 1-0. It was Alabama's first loss of the season.
The 19-1 Crimson Tide begin SEC play this weekend as the Tide travels to Auburn for a 3-game series.
It was an exciting week for the Alabama soccer team. The Tide hasn't allowed a goal this spring and won 2 more games this past week, although it did take some late game heroics. We'll have the highlights coming up next. Welcome back. The Alabama soccer team has had a terrific spring season so far. After 2 shutout wins over Columbus State and Louisiana, the Tide hosted Montevallo and went on the road to take on Lipscomb this past week.
Alabama could only manage to score 1 against the Falcons, but that's all the Tide would need. Reina Reyes, with the pass from Felicia Knox, somehow got it past the goalie and drove the ball into the net for the goal. That would do it for the Tide as goalie McKinley Crone didn't allow a single goal as Alabama defeated Montevallo 1-0.
It was another close matchup on Sunday against Lipscomb, and once again, it was Reina Reyes with the game winner. For the second matchup in the row, Reyes scored the Tide's only goal. This time, it came in the 2nd minute of overtime. Bella Scaturo, with some nifty footwork, was able to get it to Reyes, who made a diving kick into the back of the net over the goalie's head for the game-winning score. Alabama defeated Lipscomb 1-0.
And then she was tackled by her teammates.
That's right. Well, the Crimson Tide haven't allowed a goal this spring as Alabama improves to 4-0 with 4 shutout victories.
Very impressive. The Alabama volleyball team was in action as well this past weekend as the Tide took on Texas A&M in College Station. Alabama dropped both matches by a score of 3-1 and 3-0. The Alabama rowing team opened their spring season with the sweep against Eastern Michigan. Facing a strong headwind, the Crimson Tide took the top 2 spots in the Varsity 4+ and claimed the top 3 spots in the Varsity 8+. A solid performance by the Tide to open the spring. Alabama returns to action this weekend at the Oak Ridge Cardinal Invitational, hosted by Louisville in Oak Ridge, Tennessee.
Now, Kara, how often do you have multiple walk-off grand slams and a player with 2 game-winning goals in the same week?
Personally, not often, Roger, but it does happen quite a bit here at the University of Alabama. Stay with us. We'll have those plays and more coming up next in just 90 seconds.
And the cross coming in towards Reyes, and Bama has won it. The Crimson Tide stays perfect this spring.
Drifting back, that's gone. A walk-off grand slam for Savannah Woodard.
Oh, baby, did he do it? Yes, he did. It's time to walk off. Owen Diodati.
Welcome back. Those are our ATI plays of the week, and now let's take a look at our players of the week, brought to you by Payless Drugs.
Reina Reyes had 2 game-winning goals for the Alabama soccer team this past week. Reyes scored Alabama's only goal in a 1-0 win over Montevallo last Thursday. And then against Lipscomb on Sunday, 2 big plays by Reyes keeps the Alabama soccer team undefeated on the year at 4-0.
With the bases loaded and 2 out, up 4-0 in Game 2 against Northern Iowa, Savannah Woodard hit her first home run of the year, a grand slam over the right field wall for the walk-off win for the Crimson Tide. Woodard's home run gave Alabama the 8-0 run rule win in 5.
And Owen Diodati didn't just hit one grand slam on the week, he hit two. Diodati hit a grand slam in the Tide's 21-3 rout of the College of Charleston in Game 3 on Sunday, and then Diodati followed that up with a game winner on Tuesday night against South Alabama. Diodati's grand slam gave Alabama the come-from-behind 11-8 victory.
Those are our Payless Drugs Players of the Week.
Thanks for watching another episode of TideTV This Week.
We'll see y'all next week. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
This has been a presentation from Learfield IMG College.